you'll give us another 30 seconds, Mrs. Couture had a question. We have to resign. All right. Did you start the recorder? Welcome. It is May 28th. Welcome to the Governing Board meeting. We appreciate you being here. We need your support and your input, so it's important that you're here, so thank you so much. Mrs. Hahn, roll call.
Tori Anderson.
Present.
Patty Coutre.
Present.
Scott Bartle.
Present.
Leslie Carla Burnett. Anna Marie Moore.
Present.
All right, thank you. Mr. Bartle, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please? Please stand. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Mr. Bartle. And let the record reflect that Mrs. Burnett just arrived. That brings us to adoption of the agenda, and I do have a couple changes. Dr. Chestnut is in transit. He was delayed due to travel delays, so he'll be here later in the meeting. So because of that, I would like to move item 3, which is the superintendent's report, obviously since he's not here, and then items 5, D, and E from the work study, and I would like to move all of that after 7E. Does anybody have any other changes? 7E? So we'll do 7E, and then we'll do the work study items.
Just thinking out loud here, but
Go ahead.
The budget discussion, should that happen before our, we talk about those D and E? Or are we concerned that he may still not be back by?
I'm concerned he won't be back by then.
Okay.
We can certainly move it after 7C. I just don't know that he'll be back.
Okay.
Is everybody okay with moving it, put it after 7E? Okay, so that leaves those 3 items that we're moving. After 7E, is there a motion?
Move to approve as amended?
And a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, thank you very much. So that jumps us right down to call to the public. I do have some cards here. So, Mr. Randy Lazar, you are first. Oh, I need to say my little thing. Make sure you speak appropriately, don't say anything derogatory, no bad words, and keep it to 2 minutes. And board members cannot respond. We can only direct staff to follow up. Thank you.
Is it 2 or 3 minutes?
It's 3 minutes.
Okay, Madam President, members of the board, my name is Randy Lazar. I'm the principal of Pima Butte Elementary School. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak in support of the override. Several key points I just wanted to make regarding the override is that I am in support of going forward with the override this November 2014. One of the key reasons is that once you win the override, you still don't see those funds until the following school year. And that becomes key because after next school year, we won't have the additional charter school funds that we are going to get. So we're going to have a reduction right there, right from the start. And then also, I think we just need to look at various ways of not only attracting parents and students to Maricopa Unified, but also we want to look for ways to retain the students and families that we already have to stay within not only our elementary schools, but our middle schools as well as our high school. And then one of the biggest items on the override would be raising additional funds so we can reduce our class sizes. Just at my school this past year, our kindergarten classes were 31 students, first grade 31 students, our third grade 32 students, and our sixth grade 33 students. So we had very large classes throughout most of our grade levels at our school, and that just makes it very hard, not only in the teachers, but also in the students to get enough attention and support throughout the year on their academics. Then also, I would like to see us increase any kind of gifted or honors programs, again, so that we can meet the needs of our excelling students as well as attract other students to come to our school. And then also just adding more to fine arts, foreign language, PE, extracurricular activities, athletics, and instructional technology just gives us a wide range of options for a wide variety of students so that we can meet a lot of needs of a lot of different students. I'm also in support of the override going for 7 years at the 15%. I know just from being in my previous district where the time I was there, we went for 4 different overrides, won 2 and lost 2. And I know it takes a lot of work on a lot of people's part to really get the word out, and it's a really grassroots effort to get the support for that. So if you're going to put forth all this effort, I think we should go for the full amount for the full 7 years so that all that work will come to fruition once the election is won. And again, what will be important between now and November is just informing the voting public about the benefits of the override, as well as just getting the support in order to get the override to pass. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ada Safranek.
Good evening, board members, President Anderson. I'm here as well in support of the override that you will be deciding whether we will go ahead forth. I know that the last couple of overrides we've had have not passed, but I think trying again, we have nothing to lose. What do we have to lose? Man hours of putting in a lot of effort? Absolutely, but that is nothing compared to what we have to gain if it were to be approved. For example, additional funding would allow us to continue with our academic focus, which is something that will be difficult if we lose our charter funding starting not next year, but the following year. We may have additional budget cuts. We never know what the state will do. So additional funding would help reduce class sizes. We're sitting very high at K2 as well and have been for the last couple of years. That is something that we're continuously working in. If we lose funding, chances are that we will lose staffing. And so whatever we can do to bring in additional funding to maintain and increase our current staffing is definitely something that would benefit our students. Yesterday, our Santa Rosa teachers, actually, their first vacation day was a professional day for them. They had a professional development on project-based learning, which will directly impact our students, part of our academic focus. Those types of things, if we don't have funding, we will not be able to do. And project-based learning is something that will help our students to be successful academically as 21st century learners and members of our society. Additionally, technology. We are still struggling with keeping up with the technology that our students are exposed outside of school, and providing that and integrating that into their education is something that we would be able to possibly add with override funding. So I am very much in favor of us going forth with an override. Yes, it will take man hours, but I think we know what happens when we lose funding, so we're all willing to go forth and put in the effort that needs to be done. And I think the earlier we start with mail-in ballots, that information out to the public is very important, because I know last time around my mail-in ballot was out already in mail before information was coming home. So I would really like you to know that I am in favor and would like you to consider us passing it. I'm going forward with the override, and yes, hopefully passing it.
Thank you. Mrs. Reyes. Sorry, Alex, I just can't call you. I don't know why. And then Jamie, you're up next.
I'm here to ask for a no uniform. My daughter is a student at Santa Cruz, and it's very hard as a parent to find uniforms mid-year. And she's a growing girl. It's hard to find her size video, and I just feel that it's easier to wear regular clothes, and it's also cheaper as a parent to find regular clothes than uniform clothes. And that's what I wanted to address. Thank you.
Thank you. Jamie Larson?
Good evening. I'm actually here to talk about the dress code policy change or possible policy change. I'm first going to speak on behalf of Miss Gina Chaffin. She's principal at Santa Cruz. She wasn't able to be here tonight, but she did email me her opinion and asked me to share it. So excuse me for reading right now. The purpose of having a dress code is so clothing does not distract from learning. The majority of referrals or kids sent to the office for dress code violations has nothing to do with appropriate clothing. Rather, students have been referred to the office for not having a collar, wrong color of shorts, pants, or skirt, clothing with patterns, etc. When these students come to me, Gina, they are well dressed and appropriate for school. There is no reason their clothing should distract anyone from learning. Unfortunately, enforcing the current dress code is more distracting to learning than the actual clothing. It has taken time away from instruction when a teacher stops to dress code a student, and the student sent to the office is now out of class. Parents are usually not available to come to the school with a change of clothing because they work outside of Maricopa. The time it takes to address students who are well dressed but are wearing the wrong color, pattern, etc., could be better spent on instructional leadership. Now, for me, as a teacher, I would just like to say that I agree with Mrs. Chaffin. A student wearing a uniform does not equate to a student learning or achieving more in the classroom. As a parent of 3 students in Maricopa, it would be absolutely amazing not to have to buy 2 sets of clothing for the school year. That tops my list, and it would make my daughter's life so much better for her. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. Tammy Dyer? And then Ashley, you're up next.
Good evening. My name is Tammy Dyer, and I am speaking to you tonight in regards to hiring 5 additional elementary school level teachers that would reduce our class sizes. I am currently a kindergarten teacher at Pima Butte Elementary, and this last school year I had 30 to 31 students in my half-day kindergarten class, which was more students than I have ever had in one classroom in my 20 years of teaching. First of all, I would like to thank you guys for reinstating full-day kindergarten. I think that that is a huge move in the right direction for our district and the students in our district. But having said that, I am hugely concerned about class sizes in the lower grades. I met with Mr. Beckett towards the end of the year so that I could address my concerns about the school year, and I told him that I felt the district had handed me the impossible. 31 kids, 31 4- and 5-year-olds with a half day to teach them, and basically the district said, go get them. I was offered no additional help or resources for this very full load. I am here tonight to help ensure that this does not happen again next school year. Just a couple of years ago, 25 was the cap for full-day kindergarten, and we as kindergarten teachers were like, wow, that's a lot of kids. But now the cap is 31, and so my concern that I see us as a district becoming numb to these high numbers in the lower grades. Kindergarten is such an important foundational year for students to develop socially, emotionally, and academically. And if you just look at preschool and MUSD, I just made some calls today, and it seems that the highest class size I could find was 18, but I think the cap is 20. So 20 students with 3 adults, that's 1 teacher and 2 paras. So you put those same kids the next year in a kindergarten classroom, and you give 11 more students with 2 less adults, so now your ratio is 31-1. So even though the preschool teachers do a great job, there is not that much growth in the 1 year of preschool where those kids become miraculously independent and don't need the additional attention. Young children do learn best through exploration and small groups. And when you have 31 4- to 5-year-olds and you try to pull a small group, you pull your 5 kids back in small group and you have 26 children out there. that don't know how to get along, they don't know how to work independently, they don't know how to follow directions. And so you spend so much time on crowd control addressing those children that you can't even effectively work with the 5 that you've pulled. You have to teach children how to hold a pencil, how to count manipulatives, how to form letters, just basic things that we take for granted. You can't do those things. And I'm almost out of time and I have so much to say. But there's just, and the parents, they're the babies. They send their babies to school and they want to know, why did my kid come home with a skinned knee and no Band-Aid on it? Why did my kid come home and another kid hit them and I didn't get a note from the teacher? And the best answer I can give is, because I have 31 kids and I did the very best I can do. That's not a very good answer for a professional to give. It reflects poorly on me, it reflects poorly on my school, and it reflects poorly on my district. I'm almost finished. Understandably so, parents expect their babies to be taken care of when they send them off to kindergarten. And bad things don't happen in my class because I'm lazy or incompetent. They happen because I am one person. And no matter how amazing that one kindergarten teacher may be, you cannot take care of every need of 31 4- and 5-year-olds. I am asking you to give us a manageable amount of students so that every need of every student can be met. Research shows that K-3 are the critical years that determine a child's lifelong success. You can pay now or pay later, but at some point, these students will need additional help because of what they missed in these foundational years. Thank you for your time and for helping us as we all work together to make MUSD an exemplary district.
Thank you. Ashley, search.
Good evening, members of the board. I'm also here to speak with you about hiring 5 additional elementary school teachers. My name is Ashley Search. I teach at Pima Butte Elementary, and this is my 4th year teaching 1st grade. My first 2 years of teaching were in Hillsborough County, Florida, and my class size was never more than 18 students. In fact, at the time, Florida had a law that limited class sizes in grades kindergarten through 3rd grade to no more than 18 students per teacher. I moved to Arizona in June of 2012 and began teaching at Pima Butte in August. This past year, I began with 26 students in my classroom, and over the year, it increased to 31 students. I had a total of 31 students in my classroom since returning from winter break in January of 2014. Having such a large class size in 1st grade was very challenging as a teacher. First and foremost, I struggled greatly with pulling small groups of students in reading as well as math. The small groups consisted of 6 students and were skills-based. While I pulled 6 students in small groups in reading, my other 25 students would be busy with literacy centers. Those 25 students, even though they were working, they were very loud and distracting for those 6 students in small groups at a table in the corner of the room with the teacher. Oftentimes, I would either have to redirect multiple students that were working in literacy centers for talking too loudly, interrupting my small group instruction, or for other related behavior issues. Furthermore, I would often have to redirect those 6 students in my small group to pay attention to what we were doing at the table rather than turning around and looking at what the rest of the class was doing. Overall, my main concern was that the students who needed that small group reading time were not receiving it to the fullest potential. Kindergarten and 1st grade are vital times in a child's education where they're learning how to read. Without those fundamentals, some students, especially those who lack parental involvement, are bound to fall behind. The same situation occurred for small groups in math. I personally feel as though my classroom and behavior management were strong, so when students are working in literacy centers or math centers, I don't believe it's a problem with my management. It's simply a problem that there are 25 6-year-olds in one room, and they're all good friends and they like to chat with one another. With fewer students in a classroom, it would be much easier to control the chatty or disruptive students, and it would improve my ability and effectiveness to pull small groups. I'm also running out of time, so I'm going to cut this short. All in all, my purpose for being here tonight is to share with you the struggles I've had as a teacher with a large class size. My hope is that we as a school district can limit the number of students in primary elementary classrooms to no more than 25 students. A smaller class size will increase teacher effectiveness and morale. In addition, it will greatly benefit each student's education and will help teachers to meet all of the needs of their students. Thank you.
Jeff Kamarchek. And are there any other speaker cards out there? Okay, one more. Okay.
Good evening, board members. I, as a few of others that have come up, am here again to talk about support of the override. I spoke at the last board meeting about the override and support of it, but so this time I'm not going to rehash what I talked about at the last meeting. I want to talk about a plan in order to support the override. So after that meeting, and I ended those comments with the Maricopa Education Foundation being a partner in supporting an override to get passed if you so choose to add one to the ballot. So I want to talk a little bit about how we're going to go about doing that. At the May 15th Maricopa Education Foundation board meeting, there was unanimous approval to create an ad hoc committee to begin the campaign work for approval of the override. I will be chairing that meeting, that committee, and that committee will be formed, will initially be a 5-member committee designed to develop a strategic campaign plan and develop standardized messaging. And the plan will be to complete that plan and messaging by July 9th, which I believe is near the time where the board has to make a decision whether the override is going to be put on the ballot. And from that, if the school district board approves an override to be put on the ballot, that 5-member committee will convert to a core leadership team for an override campaign team. In terms of campaign funding, in the June 18th meeting for the Maricopa Education Foundation, I will be requesting that to allocate the use of some funds to begin, as seed funds, to begin a campaign program. Initially at $2,500, and we will work to see how much more we need, and we will start, as a committee, start looking for additional funding for a campaign. In addition, we'll leverage the volunteer teams that support both the Maricopa Education Foundation and the Maricopa Unified School District as the manpower for that campaign. And what we need in order to complete this are 4 volunteers who can commit to the core leadership team in the override campaign. So anyone out there willing to devote the time to start that campaign, I'm looking for volunteers. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. And Joshua Judd, I see you're holding a blue card. We'll let it slide this time. Come on up.
Dr. Chestnut, President Anderson, board members. I volunteer. I'll be your first, if you'll have me. I got up because there are several of us that have gotten up and spoken in favor of the override and how important it is. I wish I could forward the balance of my time to those kindergarten teachers to go over those reasons for reducing class time. It's very, very important for parents to hear that because those are the people on the front lines that are dealing with the classroom issues day in and day out. And it's important for anyone that works on the override commission to make that connection. Make the connection between having the money to hire additional teachers to reduce that class size, because a lot of people don't make that connection. They don't see the connection between additional funding for more teacher spots in order to reduce class size. A lot of people don't make the connection between having to close the middle school. We were here, was it last year, 2 years ago, with discussions about having to close the middle school. Those things come up because of a lack of funding. And then you ask people, well, what did you do for the last override? Well, to be honest, I wasn't even aware of it. And that's what happens. When you're not aware or you're not involved and you don't come to these meetings and you don't vote for overrides, we close middle schools or we have to cut teachers. That's the connection that we have to make with the community, explain the connection between funding and what they're going to get in the classroom. There's also what's going on in the state. I think now more than ever, at least as long as I've been here, for the 6 years I've been in Arizona, I'm intensely concerned about the direction that's going. And as far as the reduction of baseline funding over the past 2 years, discussions about vouchers. And I know everyone has their own, their own personal feelings on that, but they all have to understand that any money that goes towards that is going to reduce the money for public schools, and it is what it is. And as that continues, that's what we have to be concerned about, is the reduction of funds, and passing the override is going to secure what we have available for our kids and what we have available for our schools. So I'd like to thank the board. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joshua. Dr. Chestnut, glad you made it. We were sweating it up here. We were going to stall. We were just... Well, we did approve the agenda, and we moved your report and items 5D and E down below 7E. So, board, what do you want to... We've already got the agenda approved. Do you want to go forward with that, or? Okay, that's what I thought too, but I just want to let you know that's what we did. We were trying to prepare for the worst, just in case. All right, so let's go on to item 4, which is governing board member reports. Governing board members?
Graduation, that was a great thing to go to. All of us were there. Fantastic. Congratulations to all of our, 8th grade, kindergarten promotions, the high school. I did attend the kindergarten promotion, and I thought it was just adorable, all those little ones there. And kindergarten teachers, thank you so much for the work that you do. Those little ones are so critical. What you're doing for them now is so critical for what's going to happen to them in their future. You're setting a very strong foundation, and I don't know how you manage 30-something little 5-year-olds and 6-year-olds. That's got to be a lot, because there's a lot of energy in that room. So my deepest appreciation to the teachers that do that at that level, but throughout the entire school, even through 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th. It's a difficult thing. My mom was a teacher back in the day, and she managed a classroom of 5th graders, and I remember walking in there. And I say these stories that I go way back in the day because that's pretty much what I can relate to. And I don't know how, she'd come home so wiped out, so tired. So thank you again for that. And of course, graduation was great. High school graduation was fantastic. 6th grade promotion I was not able to attend, but congratulations to those kiddos. 8th grade promotion, congratulations to all those kiddos. And I think that's all we've covered. Did we do anything else? It was a busy week last week, so anyway.
I would like to echo that. Although it is crazy for board members, those last 2 weeks of schools, being invited, which is really nice to participate in all these activities. It's the best time for me, and I know I've said this year after year. I love celebrating the successes and the achievements of our students and our staff, the best of the best on that Friday. Without you guys, your dedication to be there every day, from the teachers to the custodians to the bus drivers, we wouldn't have the district that we have. And you guys, kudos. Thank you very much.
All right, we'll ditto that. I do want to remind those that are not here, you're out there watching, hopefully. Our emails are on the screen, and there's many hot topics and important issues that are coming up. And I know that you can't be here to the meeting, but if you will please email us, your opinion is what helps us make the decisions that we make. So if you will please send us an email to each one of us and let us know what your thoughts are on any of the topics that you've heard on the agenda tonight. So I would appreciate that, and so would the other board members. So with that, we will move on. Work study. Dr. Chestnut. We are at 5A.
5A, okay. I think that's Mr. Roush.
To look at the financial statement, and I'm happy to answer any questions regarding that you may have.
I don't have any questions. Anybody else?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right, 5B.
5B is the partnership proposal between MEF and MUSD, and Mr. Komarchek and I have talked about that on several occasions, and I know he has some information he'd like to share with us. So I'd like to call on Jeff Komarchuk.
Hello again. Before I start, can I get some power with a clicker? Thank you. Appreciate it. Wanted to come to you in working session to talk about a partnership between the Maricopa Education Foundation and the Maricopa Unified School District. Many of you are already familiar with Maricopa Education Foundation and what we do. I want to take a moment to touch on some of the things that we do. But the core of this working session item is to talk about what we can do in terms of together and focused together. So to start it off, the Maricopa Education Foundation was founded in 2007 with our 501c3 status. Since then, we've done over 20 projects. I don't even know the number, but it's bigger than 20, and bigger than $30,000 in money distributed to teachers, educators in Maricopa. We currently have 10 board members. All of them are 100% volunteer, and all of them are either active, retired, or retired educators or business owners in Maricopa. And we also, every year, and we've done our 4th one this year, our annual teacher appreciation benefit, which is becoming quite a success. So, with that, we've supported our current charter for the Maricopa Education Foundation is to support all pre-K through post-grad education in Maricopa, including public and private. So when you think about that, that's pretty wide. It spans, again, pre-K through post-grad, which could be quite big, and include all public private schools. So what's driving this need for a partnership, or this idea for Dr. Chestnut and I working together and the Maricopa Education Foundation Board contemplating direct partnership with the Maricopa Unified School District, which essentially would change our charter. The rationale, the motivators behind that are continued state and community pressures that drive the need for additional support for the district. And you're all familiar with the legislative, the financial, the economic development needs of our community and the community perception. Additional driver is improved funding opportunities with tangible programs. So this need is more on the foundation's need. We've discovered that as we continue to try to drive funds into our foundation, a lot of the bigger fish are looking for where is this money going to directly go. And currently our answer is it's going to educators who develop, who have a concept for a program that we want to fund. And that could be gym mats for a gym class, or that could be a handwriting curriculum. And when you're going to the people like Dell or you're going to Intel, it's kind of hard to say, hey, your money might go to a gym mat. So with partnering, now we can talk about some of the direct goals we can reference back to the strategic plan and use that as leverage to try to secure bigger fish or more funding. And then finally, our intention is to reduce our scope of effort to focus and improve the depth of impact. So I talked about in the previous slide, big and wide, what we want to do is become more narrow and drive deeper to improve our impact on education in Maricopa. So, and doing that with more money, more people, and more time devoted towards the district. So, what our program focus is going to be with this partnership is going to reside in 2 areas. One is our existing activity, and the second is in some new activity. So as I mentioned in the first slide, there are things that we're currently doing, and that's funding educator programs. But those will now be reserved for Maricopa Unified School District only. And that will continue to be our top priority, is to try to be a seed foundation or drive seed money into the districts directly to the educators to come up with new curriculum ideas that are currently not funded within the budget. Second is teacher appreciation benefit. We're going to continue to do that and potentially expand upon that. And volunteer coordination. We plan on adopting or working in tandem with the current volunteer team that the district has headed up by Jim Irving and others, to continue to support that activity and leverage it to both of our advantages. Some new activity is to be a district advocate. We've always been an education advocate, but now we're going to be a district advocate and start championing items that really need to drive, and a great example is PR. Another PR arm in the district, I think would be helpful. Tax credit improvement program. We've kicked around some ideas. We have some great ideas on improving the influx of tax credit money to try to stimulate that. There's a large pool there that we can be tapping into, and we're only getting a fraction of it. With some activity there, with a nice campaign, a nice program there, I think we can see some significant improvement in tax credit money. Override campaign coordination. I won't go into that in detail, but I talked a little bit about that in the call to the public. And then start to become more versed and more active in state and local legislation regarding education in support of public education in the district. So those are the programs. The next slide I have is, let's see. The next slide I have is some projections. But before I get to that, are there any questions on some of the programs or the foundation's focus? Does this sound like a bad idea? Yes.
So I think it's great that you're focusing back on MUSD, because that's how it was originally formed when it was first.
At its initial onset, correct?
Yes.
Yep.
So I'm very happy to see that coming back around, because we need to have that community support, but for all of our students to be successful. The part that I'm really interested in is, how do you see MEF supporting the legislative movement at the state level?
I can't directly answer that with a clear plan. What I can say is that MEF is very interested in being active at the state level, and very interested in starting to learn how to be more active at the state level. And I know there's resources with the Arizona School Board Association. There's plenty of resources out there, and we want to start jumping on board on that and educating ourselves on how to do that.
So would you be interested in having somebody from ASBA come down and give you a tutorial on different things you can do?
That sounds like a fantastic idea. Yep.
I can do that.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions in terms of just some of the activity that we outlined?
I don't have any questions, but I think that it's a great plan, and I thank you for all the work you're doing. You know, we can obviously use all of the help and support we can get, and so we appreciate the time and effort.
It's our pleasure. Okay. And before I jump to that slide, if you look at a lot of the school districts, and this is for people out in the public as well, look at a lot of the school districts around Arizona. A lot of them have dedicated foundations that are directly supporting that. Currently, the Maricopa Unified School District does not. To clarify this intention in this partnership is, we want to become that dedicated foundation for the district, as many other districts around the state do. So I put together just a spitball on projections and how we can support. I want to make a note that this is based on current activity trends, as well as this is a very conservative estimate. When I look at some of these programs and some of the ideas that we have that are just now getting put on the fire, I think that we can see some much larger numbers than what we see here. But if you look at our current annual impact, and this is, again, to note, this is going to all of pre-K through post-grad in Maricopa, around $14,000 a year in programs, in support. Our projected annual impacts, assuming that the partnership is solidified, for 2014 and 15, we see that increase to 22,000, then up to 48 the following year, and then 68 in the next. And where the largest chunks of money are coming from are in the area of tax credit improvement, as well as with our ability to secure more funding, we can now drive more of that money back into educator hands who have ideas. One number that is not up there, and I don't think it should be up there, but if the board chooses to put an override on the ballot, and with all of our community efforts are successful, that would be a big number. That would be part of that as well. So we're projecting over 3 years to add about $130,000, $140,000 in support money. That is all I had.
That's a lot.
Yeah, I think so.
Take it.
Sounds good. We'll find a way to give it and more.
Any other questions for Mr. Komarchuk?
Any questions on what you guys want, what we're looking for in return?
More money?
No, what the Education Foundation is looking for in return to this partnership. That is one thing I don't have on the slide, and
Mr. Komarchuk, could you give us some idea of what the foundation is looking for in return?
Thank you, Scott. Yeah, all we're looking for in return is to utilize facilities for appropriate activities. And we'll be filling out the lease agreements and providing this as part of the compensation for those facilities. And we're not looking for 100,000 square feet of office space and telecom and computers. All we're looking for is a place to hang our hat. Nearly 100% of our activity will be done outside of the office, in the volunteers' homes, that kind of stuff. But we still may need places to hang our hat, which we're actually currently doing for our monthly meetings. So just to solidify that, and that's all we're asking for.
You don't need. What do you need from us as board members? Do you need one of us to attend meetings, or what is it you're asking of us?
Your continued support as you have. As our foundation is formed, currently with 10 board members, we're with solidification of the partnership, we're going to look at our constitution and our bylaws and look at restructuring the organization. And there may be opportunity or need for one of the board members to be a board member of the foundation as well.
Okay. Dr. Chestnut, this isn't anything that that we would have to approve, is it? We need the MOU or?
No, we ran that by the attorney, and the attorney feels like the board is aware of it. That's good. And the facility use would fall under our normal facility use policy. And so Jeff and I have talked about that. So I think it's more of an information thing tonight. And I assume Jeff will continue to provide progress reports. But as far as any MOUs or anything like that, our attorney advises that wouldn't be necessary.
And just one more thing to interject, I'm glad you brought that up on reports. The other thing I would ask is that maybe we have just a quarterly agenda item to present to the board in a working session of activities of the Maricopa Education Foundation, so we can get a little bit more visibility on our partnership and the work we're doing.
That's great. Anything else for Jeff? Thank you. I appreciate
Thank you
all
very
you
much.
do.
Of course.
Yeah, it's awesome.
I'm giving you power back, Dr.
All right, Dr. Chestnut. 5C, changes to the dress code.
General dress code that applies to K-12 that outlines a dress code for all grades. We have a more restrictive one for elementary, have had for several years, and that's really in the handbook. It's not part of the policy. It's permitted by the governing board policy, but the specifics in the handbook are different. Well, we've kicked this around for several years, actually, before I even arrived, and this year the elementary principals continued to discuss this and have come up with a new proposal for elementary dress code, and I know a couple of them are here and would love to speak to that issue. So, Eva, do you want to go first, or Randy? I'm not sure who's going first. Eva Shafronic, principal at Santa Rosa Elementary, and I know, and Randy Lazar, principal at Pima Butte.
Hello again, and I think we'll kind of speak together, but did you get a chance to review the dress code? So when we started talking about dress code, as you've heard Ms. Chaffin's email, pretty much when I thought about, well, what would I say to you? Her message is pretty much what I was thinking in my head. Our goal is for students to be dressed appropriately, not distract from the educational environment, but also we want to focus our time on the things that matter, making sure kids are in class, making sure that our teachers are utilizing instructional time for us as principals to be visible in the classroom and lessen the time that we're spending on discipline of dress code. Now, don't get me wrong, we will still be dealing with the short shorts and, you know, some of the outfits that are not appropriate, but we're dealing with them now with our current dress code. And we talked at length and had a unanimous decision that, you know, doesn't matter whether their jeans are pink or shorts are plaid and their shirts are striped or have SpongeBob on them, do those distract from the educational environment? And we decided no. I mean, bottom line is we have bigger fish to fry, and we want our kids to be dressed appropriately, but at the same time, we want to be maximizing all the time that we have.
Okay, Madam President, members of the board, just to reiterate what Eva just said, again, the 6 elementary principals unanimously supported this proposal for the dress code changes. And again, we all saw collectively that, again, like was mentioned, it's not so much that the child wears a striped shirt or plaid shorts or a shirt has a collar or not a collar, because, you know, again, the focus is on them having a good learning environment. And also at my school, I know that we've had various spirit days where kids dress in a lot of different ways. And again, kids look forward to that, and that enhances their educational experience. And also days like pajama days and what have you. So again, you know, and again, that's contrary to the dress code, but again, it didn't distract from education, it enhanced it. So I would just say that we would like your support in moving this direction to just have the dress code still be within reason, where we can still enforce certain ways of dressing and what have you, but also make it so that the environment is very conducive to education. Thank you. Any questions?
I understand the money thing. I understand we want things to be simple. We want things to be easy in order to enforce. I will say, however, I was part of that. I was teaching here when we decided to do uniforms, and the reason for that was behavior, because we were having trouble with gangs. And so the dress uniform was put into place. We were specifically having the problems with our elementary schools. So my question to you is, I haven't heard anybody talk about behavior. So how is this going to affect classroom behavior? Because as a teacher, I do know that if kids are dressed with a collar, I know my own boys, they act completely different if they've got a collar on than when they've got a crew neck t-shirt on. So can you address the behavior side of it in the classroom?
So we have Pima Butte t-shirts that don't have collars, and there's some kids who wear a different one every single day, and that has not, you know, taken away from the educational environment, hasn't added to any discipline problems at the school. And again, whether a child has blue or khaki or black shorts, or if they have plaid shorts, that really doesn't distract from the educational environment. And again, it hasn't added to any discipline problems in terms of the dress. You know, again, as Ms. Chaffin mentioned, there are other behavioral things that are going on unrelated to the dress code that have taken our attention, not so much, you know, the type of dress that the student's wearing.
I don't have a question, but I do want to thank you guys. I know that some of you know that I've been wanting our uniform code or dress code to be the same K through 12, and I think this is a step in the right direction to teach these kids how to dress appropriately, behave appropriately in the classroom at the elementary level, so that when they do get into middle school, I know that when my daughter was in 6th grade, she couldn't wait because she didn't have to wear a uniform anymore and she could pick her own clothes, but she had to learn to dress appropriately. And I think this is really going to help if we can start giving those groundworks at the elementary level and showing them that, you know, this is how you dress appropriately, this is how you behave appropriately, no matter what you're wearing. So thank you.
And we did take into consideration the 712 dress code and, being aligned with that. And I know that secondary schools did have a more stringent dress code a few years back. In regards to your question, President Anderson, we have Spirit Days as well. And I cannot link that to an increase in behavior discipline issues. When we have the silly Spirit Week where students dress up in all sorts of ways, I cannot link that to an increase in discipline in those weeks. So,
no, that's what I wanted to hear. So I appreciate that. So in reading what we've got and what you've proposed in the dress code, it seems pretty reasonable. Will this be able to be followed?
that is up to us. I mean, it's the same thing as, we have our current dress code. I mean, the biggest thing that we are going to fight is the length of, shorts and skirts and dresses, and we are still fighting that with our upper grades as it is with the current dress code. So I do believe that, it doesn't really change in any way. It makes it less restrictive for our parents. And parents that have bought uniforms, I was putting away my son's clothes as a parent, and I'm like, oh, this is still good next year, even though it's a polo shirt. So it's not that parents have to go out and buy a whole new wardrobe. Kids can continue wearing what.
Okay, any other questions on this item? Yeah.
Observation, really, and I may be reading way too much into this, so take this with a grain of salt, but there's a lot of discussion about this item, and in my view, there's no one more appropriate and more qualified to make this decision than the principals. And so I just would ask us as a board to look at, are we providing the sufficient culture to Dr. Chestnut and to the staff that we're empowering them to make these decisions? I mean, these folks this is a full-on sales pitch for us to do what they have unanimously said, this is what's in the best interest of kids and student achievement. So just an observation.
This does not need board approval, correct, Dr. Chestnut? Correct. Okay. All right. Any other discussion? Okay. Thank you. I appreciate it. And again, parents can email us, people can email us. It's a passionate topic, so let us know. All right, so we're going to skip down to the consent, because remember we moved D and E down. So do we have a motion?
Move to approve the consent agenda.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. So that takes us down to 7A, which is to approve the expense voucher.
President Anderson, this deals with my company, so I'm going to recuse myself.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
So this is voucher number 1449. And Dr. Chestnut, my question to you earlier, and you did answer me, but I do want to make it public. This amount, was this for a year or was this for a semester? It didn't give a timeline.
Most of the work that was done this year in Maricopa did 2 4-page newsletters. We have paid for one of those 4-page newsletters. This invoice includes 1 4-page newsletter and then a whole bunch of online advertising as well as advertising in Maricopa Magazine and newspaper. Our thought and plan was to get a lot of publicity out there about our all-day kindergarten being restarted and our academic focus at all 9 schools, and we seem to have gotten a good response from that. So that's why it's a larger bill than it was last year at this time.
And you have seen response from those advertisements?
We have.
All right. Any other questions or motions? We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
No.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries with 1 abstention. Being Mr. Bartle. Mr. Bartle, you can come back in. But don't forget the pizza.
I wish.
All right, 7B, Mr. Beckett.
Thank you, President Anderson, members of the governing board, Dr. Chestnut. First, want to not apologize, but just say we had a number of amendments in the last few days here, and just speaks of the volatility of the time when it comes to personnel during this time of the year. So hopefully you received the latest personnel schedule, and if you have questions, I will take those now.
I just have one question.
Yes.
How close are we to filling all of our teaching positions? Or open positions, I'm saying.
We have a number of positions we still need to fill. We are in much better shape than we were last year at this time. I can just let you know that.
Okay.
If you need an exact number, I can certainly provide that to you.
No, I just like, that's good.
Contracts had to be returned?
It was before they left, before the 23rd, and I'm sorry, I don't have that exact date, Member Nor.
Okay.
Mr. Bickett, do you attribute that to, do we have a higher retention rate this year, or we just did a better job of recruiting, or?
I actually, Member Bartle, I did do some preliminary looking. It looks like our attrition is about half what we saw last year at this time. Obviously, we still have some additional time to go yet before the school starts, but we are encouraged.
And also, Mr. Beckett went to one or two more job fairs than last year, I know.
That's right.
And really worked that system as well as he could. And I think we got some benefit from that, too.
Sure.
So if contracts, we've passed the date of turning in your contract, so if you've turned it in, past this point, if we get resignations, we'll be assessing contract assessments, correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions or motions on the HR schedule?
Move to approve HR schedule.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Beckett.
Thank you.
7C, discussion and possible approval of a new ASBA Legislative Committee Delegate Alternate. Dr. Chestnut, you want me to go ahead and explain why this is on there?
Yes, please.
Okay. Every year, ASBA has a delegate assembly, which is where we approve the legislative agenda, which then we proceed to push through the legislation. So every year, Mrs. Coutre is the delegate, but we need to have an alternate. I have served as the alternate in the past. I am asking for another person to take that position because I currently serve on the Arizona School Board Legislative Committee. So it is I think it would serve our district better if somebody else was the alternate, so that we would have two people there that would be supportive of our district legislative proposals. So with that, the meeting is on September 6th. It is a Saturday, so I need to know who is available to go that day. It does take, we try to get everybody out of there by 2 o'clock, but it does start at 8 o'clock in the morning. So I would need to know who's available of Mrs. Knorr, Mrs. Burnett, or Mr. Bartle that would like to attend as the alternate. All you need to do as the alternate is sit in the back and be prepared in case Mrs. Coutre gets sick, which she's not allowed to do. So you would just need to be prepared to step in if something happened to Mrs. Coutre. So, since we couldn't talk about this before, who is available on September 6th to be able to go and spend the day with me at the Legislative Committee?
I'm available September 6th, so it's not, you know.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Mrs. Burnett, are you okay with that?
I'm okay with it,
Okay.
yeah, that's
Mrs.
fine.
Knorr, are you okay with that? Okay, so thank you. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. So Mrs. Burnett is now our delegate alternate for our assembly, which is on September 6th. So thank you. I appreciate that. And I will be there too, but not as the delegate. Okay. Making faces. Yes, we do. All right. That brings us to 7D. Discussion? discussion and possible approval of the 5 additional elementary teachers for the purpose of class size reduction. So Dr. Chestnut, if you would like to start the conversation on that.
Sure, I'd be happy to do that. I'm still trying to figure out what order we're going in.
Well, we're going to go to D and E,
Okay.
and then we're going to go back to your superintendent's report, and then 5D and E.
Okay.
Okay?
The reason I ask, and I apologize for being late, is that this discussion item obviously fits in with our work study item on 2014-15 budget, and so pretty much interrelated. And in fact, several of these things are interrelated. It's that time of year because it's all about the budget. And as you know, we have item D with possible approval of 5 additional elementary teachers, and then item E, possible additional funding for district-wide technology and funding of academic focus at all 9 schools. So all of those 3 items really are, need to be part of our budget decision, our final budget decision. And I honestly don't think that we need to make a decision on 7D or E tonight, even though we listed them as an action item. And so just thought that it would be a good discussion. But the item 7D, really focusing on the 5 additional elementary teachers at a cost of $50,000 annually as our average salary and benefit cost for a teacher. So the total proposal would cost $250,000 annually. And I think when we go back and talk about the general budget issues, Mr. Roush has done a nice job of projecting out really our funds, our revenue. We're in a unique situation this year because we received additional charter funds this year and we'll receive those again next year. And as a result, we're able to put a fair amount of money in reserve that we normally wouldn't be able to do. And so this gives us a unique budgeting challenge as to, well, how do we want to utilize those reserve funds over the next 1, 2, 3, 4 years? How does that play out? And so he's done a nice job of doing some projecting out for the next 3 or 4 years. And I think that probably the best way to make an intelligent decision on adding additional teachers at this point is to really look at what our projections look like for the next couple of years. So that'd be the background information, and we'd be glad to answer any questions you might have on that.
If we were to approve the 5 additional teachers, how much less will that reduce the class size if those 5 teachers are hired?
I have that number buried in my pile here somewhere. I can't quote it to you off the top of my head. We did crunch that number. Does anybody remember that number? We can get that to you, and it wouldn't be a tremendous amount, actually, because we're spreading, 5 teachers over 6 elementary schools.
So it's not going to be a very big margin, or,
It's
maybe
1 or
2
1.5
3
students, yeah, something like that.
But that would be average, correct?
Average.
So, yes, on average, it would be the ratio, which is now about 1 to 27.5 to 28 in the elementary schools, could go down to possibly 1 to 26.5, 27. But that doesn't, that's an average over all 6 elementary schools. Let's say we have, like we had the 6th grade, 5th grade who was in here last board meeting that had 35 students in their 6th grade class. That would make a tremendous difference in that class, because you see what I'm saying? Because we have some 2nd grade classes, they're at 22. So it's not like you're just taking all of the kids and splitting them up into 27 and you have all 27 sizes. What it would do is help in these really large classes, really large class sizes that we have in some grades in some of the schools. For instance, at Pima Butte Kindergarten, as Mrs. Dyer mentioned, at 31 all year long. That's very, very high compared to our district kindergarten class sizes. The 5th grade from Saddleback, was it 2 weeks ago? At 35 all year long. That's really high. You add a teacher there and a teacher there, and that makes a huge difference for those kids, which is why I asked for this item to be considered. I think that we need to invest in the classroom, and I know that I've made this point before, but we spend less money in the classroom than we do out of the classroom, and I would like to change that dynamic. And I think that if we're going to ask voters to approve an override to support our district, if we're going to do that, then we need to prove to the voters that we're willing to invest in the classroom. And it can't be contingent on this or that. I think we need to show them that we're committed to students' education and to putting money inside the classroom. I would like to know that number, though, what the ratio would be. The other thing is, we hired 4 additional high school teachers for next year, which would take our high school ratio from 1 to 30 to 1 to 28. And our middle school ratio is currently 1 to 22. So conceivably, our elementary school has the same ratios as our high school, which if you look at all of the research done on education, elementary is where you should have the smallest class sizes. And right now, elementary is where we have the highest class sizes along with high school, which again, in high school, that's a little bit more usual or common. So.
Well, I agree with you, Mrs. Norris, especially, they have the lower class sizes. And I do understand the ratios are just average ratios. There are middle school classes that have almost 40 kids in them. So me personally, I know we've approved items before having a budget earlier this year, and it was necessary because of the timing of the items. But for me, yeah, I would love to hire more teachers, but I want to pass a budget before we start making more expenditures. I also want to see what the class projections are going to be for all the grades across the district. I don't want to pigeonhole the administration by saying, we're going to improve 5 elementary teachers. What happens if the projections are higher at the middle school, but we've already pigeonholed, they can't hire any middle school teachers because we told them they could only hire elementary school teachers. I think we need to leave that up to the principals and the administration to determine where those greater needs are for our teachers. But I would like to see what our projections are going to be for next year. And I know they're just projections. You can't give me finite numbers, and I understand that. But I'd also like to pass the budget before we have to be fiscally responsible with the money that we have. And we want to give the best education to the students. And I agree wholeheartedly that we need to put money back in the classrooms, that we need to reduce the class sizes, but we still have to be fiscally responsible for the district. So me personally, I'd much rather pass a budget and then let them know what the pot of money that they can go and spend with.
About passing a budget, but what we've done this year is approve a lot of new expenses without a budget, and so to make that the baseline now doesn't seem appropriate because we've already gone 3/4 of the way there in approving any new monies. And the justification for hiring the high school teachers and the special ed teachers was that you've got to hire in advance if you want to get good teachers. And so, I mean, honestly, I think if we wait on this, then it almost is a moot point because it's going to be tough to recruit good teachers in June, given that they're being recruited by other schools. The other thing that one of the reasons I asked for this to be put on is because every elementary school principal and teacher who came before us over the last 6 months, the number one issue they said, their number one challenge was class size. Every one of them, without fail. And that is them asking us for help. And how can we hold them accountable to the standards and to increasing their school grades when we're not helping them at the very basic level, which they all ask for unanimously? And I look at some of the expenses that are suggested in other budget ideas, in other action items, and such as more funding for academic focus or more district-wide technology funding. Not one teacher said, I need more money for academic focus. They said, I need more money, or I need smaller class sizes. And, I think that we need to listen to those priorities of the teachers and the priorities of the principals when we make these decisions. Because they're on ground. They know what they need better than we know what they need.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Chestnut, what would it cost? And this is just something that you can get back to us on, or get back to me on. What would it cost the district to reduce our class sizes to 27 across the board? We have 9 schools. The next question I have is, Some of our schools have high numbers, some of our schools have low numbers. So is the bigger picture, do we need to reboundary to balance out the class sizes?
I don't think so. If you reboundary schools, you can maybe shift students from one school to another, but you're really not going to control for class size that way. I mean, it's true that Butterfield is our largest elementary, and I believe it's Santa Cruz is our smallest. But we could shift some students, but it wouldn't necessarily impact class size.
Well, another question I have is, before this even comes up, is how do we maintain this? Can it be maintained for the next few years, or do we have to go through another RIF? Being part of the process for the last 5 years, our teachers that have been here have not had a raise. And we told them 5 years ago that if you stick with us, we know it's going to be tough, but times will get better and we will be able to reinstate that salary schedule. If we've got extra money, I would rather see our teachers' salary schedule reinstated first, as well as other priorities to invest in our teachers. So I'm not ready to vote on this tonight until we have a complete budget and until we understand what we're looking at, until we have our projections from staff. We are not administrators, so I would prefer that staff and Dr. Chestnut come with a recommendation of a budget and where that money needs to be spent, and then we as board members do our job and approve a budget and take care of policy and let administrators be administrators. So that's my soapbox, and I'll step down now.
President Anderson, I would love to see a budget. It's May 28th and we haven't seen a budget. So without a budget, I have taken to making suggestions because that's my only opportunity.
Well, in fairness, we have presented an overall budget view of what we anticipate it will be. We haven't brought the final action item document, and we are working on that and hope to have that to you soon. But in fairness, I think we have presented the big picture, and we have presented what we anticipate reserves to be by the end of this year. And then I know the reason why this discussion isn't going as well as it could, because I was late, but I think if we go back and we talk about the budget overview and how we project our reserve for the next few years, I think that'll help this issue become more clear, because reserve funds are clearly part of this puzzle, which makes it extra difficult, really. It's not just straightforward year-to-year funding in this case because of charter funding.
I think it's a great discussion, and I think the discussion needs to happen. I would like to see it be a part of a recommendation from you, Dr. Chestnut, and if we could have that by the next board meeting, that would be awesome. I would just like to see the discussion continue as part of a full budget with whatever recommendations will come in that. I think it's great. I think we definitely need to reduce class sizes. We also need to pay our staff more. So how do you do both?
May I ask one question? Is it possible when you give us the budget recommendation that you can let us know how much of that budget will be going towards the classroom and how much will be going towards like support services? Just kind of like a ballpark figure for us so that we can see how the total budget, not the revenue, the additional revenue and the additional expenses, but as a total budget, so we know what we're projecting to spend into the classroom.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
As a total budget, I agree. I would like to also see whatever comes in as the new monies that we'll be spending this year, the new revenues that we're spending, that broken down into in-classroom and out-of-classroom would be very helpful.
And that's what you meant.
She meant the total budget, didn't you?
I meant the total of the, whatever our budget's going to end up being. Was it 36 million?
35 and change.
35 and change. Round it up.
Mr. Barley, you were going to say something and I cut you off.
Yes, I would. I think that from what I'm gathering, there's at least one person who would like to take a vote on this item tonight, at least one person who would like to take a vote on this item some other day, and at least one superintendent who would like to give us more information before we make any such decisions. So I would like to make a motion, and I do make a motion, that we table this item as well as the following item, which is also talking about budget, to discuss and possibly act upon later in this meeting before item H.
I will second that motion. To table D and E. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Discussion?
To thank Ms. Knorr for requesting this to be placed on the agenda. She's listened, she's researched, and she's very passionate, and I'm very pleased to be working with her on this issue. And, you know, really, thank you so much for doing this. We're trying to, she's really recognizing where the funding needs to go. And 5 additional teachers, I mean, we could take all the help we could get, but it would be great if we could maybe look at the overall budget, and maybe we could even approve more teachers, hopefully, something like that. So, just a comment.
Okay, thank you. It's been a good discussion. We do have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Good discussion. I appreciate your opinions and the input, so thank you very much. All right, so now that brings us to our items that we moved down, which would be the superintendent's report, and then 2 work study items, D and E. So Dr. Chestnut.
Well, superintendent report, President Anderson, members of the board, I do not have slides tonight, so that's a first. And just a couple comments. Last week was a great week, and it's a great way to end the school year, and it's already been reflected in governing board member comments. I did a couple other things last week that were interesting. On Monday the 19th, I attended the State Board of Education meeting, and there was a proposal to change the grading scale for high school letter grades as of August. And about the first we heard about that was maybe mid-March, end of March, somewhere in there. Might even been the 1st of April, but it was pretty recent development. And so I attended the State Board meeting with 6 or 7 other superintendents and asked the State Board to not make that change for this coming year, and they voted 6-2 to not make the change this coming year. So that was good. They will be required really to make that change a year from now when we have the new state test, and there are some recalibration things that will have to happen, but hopefully with a lot of lead time so we can explain it to people ahead of time. So that was good news. The 8th grade promotion ceremony on the 20th was wonderful, and it was a great event, and those 8th graders look so grown up when they're all dressed up, and that's a great way to end the year for them. On Wednesday the 21st, I was able to attend the Auction Tribal Council with Member Carlisle Burnett, so thank you to you for being there. And we gave our quarterly report to the Tribal Council on Auction grant funds. And if I haven't sent that to you, which is possible, I will send you a copy of that. But we are making progress on that, and it was a good report. I think they were pleased. On Thursday morning, the 22nd, with Leslie, I attended the kindergarten promotion at Santa Cruz, and that's a lot of fun to see those kindergarten kids promoting. And high school graduation, I thought, was just a wonderful event, and I think our high school staff really does a nice job of putting that together. They really do. And it was a great celebration. My favorite part is actually standing on stage and watching that giant celebration on the field with all those families. You know, that is just absolutely the best part. And then, as Patty mentioned, on Friday, we had a great Best of the Best celebration. We had over 100 staff members nominated by other staff members, and a lot of good recognition, well-deserved recognition. So that was a positive way to end the school year. Just want to remind you also that Friday, several of us are registered for the Arizona Business Education Coalition ABEC conference. It starts at 8 a.m., so I'm thinking we could carpool from here at 7 a.m., something like that, and head in. So make sure you have that on your calendar if you're registered. And that's all I have to report.
Do we post a quorum for Friday? Okay, thank you. All right, thank you. That was quick. I missed the slides, though. All right, that brings us to 5D, which is the budget discussion, which is also you, Dr. Chestnut, and Mr. Roush.
I will lead off, and Mr. Roush, of course, is our budget analyst and expert, and he's the one that's prepared all these numbers. But just to refresh your memory, there is one document in there that he presented last time, and it has budget highlights. And he's done a nice job of just highlighting the two main budgets that we work out of, which is our M&O budget and our district additional assistance. And he has estimated the ending year reserves in those two budgets. He estimates that M&O will end on June 30th at $250,000, and district additional assistance will end the year at $2,600,000. So those are the highlights, and I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Mr. Roush?
If you review those are, they continue to be the same highlights that we presented to you last week, or last board meeting. So. I do want to explain a little bit of budgeting process.
Mr. Roush, can you grab a microphone, please?
Thank you. I do want to explain a little bit of the budgeting process. Some of you are pros and have been through this. You know that we can only move on when we get information and formulas and our worksheets from the state of Arizona. We recently, within the last week, did get that information. It takes us more than one day to prepare a budget. So it came out last week, and usually it takes us about 3 weeks to get through the formulas. So we anticipate doing that quicker than we have in the past. The last day to pass an overall and adopt a budget is July 15th in the state of Arizona. We have a preliminary budget that we'll get out beforehand. So anything we do before that would be projections, and the board could pass a budget without us doing any worksheets, just based on projections. Some school districts do that. It's a little risky, but that's a possibility to do too. This one. So. Yes.
I understand that we're always waiting for the state, and that process takes way longer than it should, it seems like.
Mm-hmm.
But it seems to me that we know more or less what those numbers are going to be. And so there is a point in time, much before now, where I would think that we could at least have a most likely, a best case scenario and a worst case scenario that we could tentatively at least discuss and tentatively approve. So at least there's some direction, and we know, okay, if this happens, then we'll go in this direction, instead of having all this heartburn and making these budget decisions before there's actually a budget decision made. But do you guys feel like that's possible in future years, that we could expedite a chunk of this process?
I think we're, respectfully, I think we're doing that. We're giving you the budget highlights, we're giving you the suggestions right now and how they will roll up. So I think we are doing that.
Well, I think also we can do better. I mean, we're not saying we have a perfect system, and we can certainly, get more projections earlier. I don't see any problem doing that. But kind of as Mr. Roush said, we kind of refine it as we go along. So, yeah, I think we can do better next time.
It just makes your job easier too, right? The more direction you guys have, the earlier. So food for thought for future years.
Would it be possible to have, and I think I said this already, to have a proposal at our next board meeting on June 11th?
That's our goal, and we
Okay.
hope to meet that timeline. Isn't that correct?
Even if it's option A and option B, I mean, just something so that
Well,
we can.
we have to have worksheets that are approved for the proposed budget. That's how the state works, so.
But we still know basically what the numbers are going to be. I mean, even from what you've given us,
Right.
we could still construct a basic budget so that staff can go forward.
How a proposed, yes, we can, but it still has to follow the format of the state of Arizona. So-
I understand that. But
So,
I would just like to see all of these budget highlights and everything put into a proposal and bring it to us.
We have this information that's on our screen right now.
Right.
Right? So we don't necessarily have to wait before hashing some of these issues
Correct.
out. There's obviously an issue that was brought up tonight. Do we give teacher raises, or do we hire new teachers with X dollars?
Right.
So.
That would be part of a proposal, I would think.
Already. Yeah. Right? Did we?
We did not reinstate from 5 years ago.
Okay, but we
We've
did a
given
1.25
the equivalent of 2
Yeah.
steps over the last 2 years, right? And then they got a bump with the Auction money
Right.
and so
Oh,
forth.
the bonuses, yes.
I think in a board meeting, it was approved to do a salary step. It was approved to do quite a few of these. So a lot of these, again, have already been talked about and approved, and the direction is going that way. The actual adoption of that, or the proposed budget, it's a formula-driven proposed budget. So the expenditures can go up or down, but the proposed budget has a certain formula to follow.
I understand that.
Mhm.
So it's got a formula that it follows. So you can't like sort of move funding from one area to another, maybe in a way of like proposing, well, here's what we want to propose if we want to hire 15 new teachers, and this is what it would cost. Or here's what we could do if we are going to increase or reinstate their salary steps. You can't do something like that. I think is that what we mean when we say proposal? Just something where we can kind of see where monies can be moved. And it's difficult to move money. There's nothing more important than the other, I know. But yeah, a kind of an A and a B option. Here's what we would do if we wanted to hire this many teachers. 5 teachers is great, but that's kind of like a Band-Aid, considering the magnitude of what these teachers are dealing with.
Right. There's in the state of Arizona, it's not a really great budget document. There's one page for the expenditures, and basically you're approving the bottom line of that expenditure. All those line items then can be adjusted. So just because basically the thing that could change then is the expenditure line item, the overall expenditure line item could change, but within those budgetary line items, you're really not approving those budgetary line items. You're approving one amount, one bottom line expenditure amount.
Yeah, just a couple of comments. Just to be really clear, I would like nothing more than to hire 5 additional, elementary teachers or K-12 teachers, and I know Mr. Roush feels the same way. And our job is to bring you a proposal that's fiscally sound. And there's some debate, there's some judgment that goes into that. That's why we're having this discussion. I think that what everybody really wants to see is on the bottom right-hand corner of the page there, and it says M&O and DAA projected fiscal year 15 through 17. Mr. Roush has crunched those numbers. If we could put that slide on the screen, I think that this would answer some of your questions, because as we mentioned, our decisions are wrapped up in our reserve funds. How do we want to allocate those over the next few years? Because if we hire additional teachers, we are going to have to pay for them out of reserve funds. We're not going to get enough funding from the state of Arizona to pay for those. So we have to make a judgment on what the right number is going forward. And I think that spreadsheet will do that. This highlight, well, that last one was perfect. Christian, if you go back to that one, let's start with that one. Yeah, that one right there. Mr. Roush prepared this, and so the projections she's making are based on these assumptions. Item number 2 there, that in 16 and 17 we would add 5 elementary teachers, a 1% raise for staff, 2% inflation, because we're going to have to face inflation. Added deferred maintenance, because we can't just postpone that stuff forever. I think we've postponed a lot of it over the last several years because we have newer facilities and because the state cut funding, but we can't do that forever. Letter E, we have to continue to purchase buses. Our buses wear out. F, things like carpet are another example of good deferred maintenance, but that's a big ticket item, so that's listed separately. And then letter G refers to the reserves being used to balance. So if we go to that other spreadsheet, Christian, that you had up there, that's the detail, and I'll let Mr. Roush talk about that.
Dr. Chestnut suggested that we project as well as we can without, again, some of the formulas in there. So it's a conservative projection. So what I've done is went back to the past fiscal year 14 budget and detailed some of the information out. Of course, there's formulas for all of this. M&O, RCL, including transportation, the way that we're funded is we're funded on FTEs a year prior, but then the charter funding changed that, so we were funded on part of the year prior and part of the year current, and there's a kind of a funding quirk in the formula that when we've done this, we kind of, when public school districts have went from public to charter, they pick up a little bit extra money. So our RCL in fiscal year 14 is a little bit higher. It'll all come back to normal funding in fiscal year 15 and fiscal year 16 too. It'll go back into kind of some normal trends. So the projections are, Board Member Bartle picked up on, fiscal year 15, the RCL is a little bit lower, and it has to be because fiscal year 13, the RCL was quite a bit lower than fiscal 14, and it picked up. It's just an anomaly in the funding formula, kind of a quirk. Again, it benefited us.
Speak education, M&O, RCL, maintenance and operations, revenue control limit.
Revenue control limit, and that's the formula the state of Arizona has put up for an amount that you cannot go over. It's a controlled limit. So part of this, whatever you base your budget on, you can have your expenditures go to certain things. That's a administrative and a board decision, but you cannot go over the control limit that's been approved by the state. So even if you voted on that, you can't have it go over. The treasurer in the Pinal County School District office will not let you exceed that revenue. So again, we've just gone down there. We're transferring about $1.3 million into the DEA fund because we don't need all of that extra money that are going in that RCL. DSEG, we have a DSEG amount, revenue about $1.29 million, and we have a budget balance carry forward. Again, that's just a formula-driven amount of $168,000, and we're using some transfers, adjustments and transfers in some of the other funds besides maintenance and operation funds. So that's what that adjustment and transfers mean. Total revenues, again, this year, the budget that was passed, revenue, which is the limit that we can go to is $30,132,000. Again, we project expenditures about $29,932,000 for this year. We'll see where it comes in, which would give us a budget balance carry forward about $200,000 for next year. The DAA is used to be, again, soft capital and unrestricted capital. It's now DAA. We get an annual non-charter amount of about $900,000. Charter amount this year is $600,000. You can see in fiscal year 15, it'll be $2,300,000. Again, if things weren't changed, next year it would have been about $3.7 million. So if the legislature didn't reduce it. So again, you can see from the top line, transfer from DAA goes in $1,332,000 goes into the revenue piece, and we have a budget balance carry forward. So the total revenues were about $3 million, and again, expenditures, we have ongoing expenditures about $400,000. We have some additions. There were this year the charter focus and some of the other additions that we approved, and then we have a budget balance carry forward of about $2 million. Now these are projections; they will vary. These aren't actual. We actually close out our books in August, so first week of September, and so then again, how to calculate that is you just start with the RCL, and it's based on FTEs. I did a conservative estimate for our FTEs because I don't want to overestimate where we're going to be, so it is conservative. Going down to fiscal year 15, again with the highlights that were suggested, I put that into that budget, and that's kind of what you're asking for. So that's the projection.
Teachers.
Including the 5 additional teachers. And so I started that in year 15, And you can see that, again, going down on that spreadsheet, the total revenues now are $31,900,000. Projected expenditures then are $31,742,000, and that leaves about $250,000 in a budget balance carry forward. Again, this is the detail you wanted. This is, I mean, we could go into a lot more detail, but this is a summarized amount. The non-charter revenue would be about $400,000. Charter, just because of the anomaly and how we do how we've had to change from charter to non-charter. Charter revenue is about 2.3. So in the DAA, then with our carry forward, we'd have about $4,750,000. Going down though, we have projected recurring expenditures about $400,000 and $625,000, which again is the focus that we approved, the technology and the one bus that we approved in there per the highlights. And then we have a transfer out. Sure.
Is anyone opposed if we move forward to the reserves?
No, that's what I was going to ask too.
Because I think we ought to look at, kind of start working backwards from the answer. And
okay.
To me, a big variable here is reserves. What the board feels comfortable with carrying in reserves, so we know how much to want to invest. So.
Well, that brings to the question I had. Thank you, Mr. Bartle. It's to Dr. Chestnut and Mr. Roush. What, for a district our size and to keep us financially secure, what are you comfortable with and recommend that we have in reserves to carry us over? So then we know, okay, we should have this much in reserve, so now we can use this much to hire teachers and give salary increases, restore the steps, and continue to do it for the next 2 years.
Right.
So that's all I want to know is, what do you recommend for reserves? And then we can go forward as to the difference. That's what we know we can spend and invest into our classrooms.
Standard in schools are about 3%. So
3% of our total budget.
Or more of our total budgets, right? So we have more than that in there now, mainly because of our charter situation, right?
Okay, so.
General, when you look at the reports and the reserves in school districts, recommend 3%. If you go over that, they say you have high reserves, and if you go under that, they say you have low reserves.
So based on that 3%, Dr. Chestnut, can you bring back a projection at our June 11th meeting on how to spend those additional reserve funds, keeping us 3% in reserves? That's what I would like to see is, okay, you've got $1.5 million, and we are going to be able to maintain this for the next 3 years. That's what I would like to see.
We can certainly do that. I do think this sheet is instructive, though, on that topic.
Right. I think this sheet shows you that.
If we could just go to fiscal year 17, can you talk about that?
Right. If we go to fiscal year 17, we can see that continuing with the same expenditure trend, our reserves in the M&O fund is 0, and our reserves in the DAA is $195,000. And we show that we're spending $957,000 of reserves in other funds. So essentially, this is probably less than 0.5% with the current expenditure trends, with 5 extra teachers, with all the 1% raises and all the assumptions that we put into this. So it would be less than 0.5%. So that would be high risk.
I understand that. So what I want to know is keeping 3% in there. I just want to know what the difference is and how do you project we spend that. That's all I want to know.
And we can do that, but just
okay.
Go back to the point that was made previously. We have an unusual situation here because we need to carry additional revenue, or additional reserves rather, because we need to make it last for a few years. And I realize the Auditor General recommends 3% in a normal business cycle. We're not in a normal cycle right now. We've received additional revenue, and I think our financial and fiscal responsibility is to manage that reserve properly over a period of a few years. Now, the board has to make the decision on how long that period is, but I'm telling you, it's more than 1 year. So I don't think the 3% is going to apply well to to the equation in this budget that we have to adopt for next year. We can certainly come back with some recommendations that reflect that idea and that issue of what is the proper way to manage the reserve, which is what we're trying to do. We're trying to have some discussion about it and make sure everybody's kind of understanding it, listening to your input, and then I think, the next time we can come back with better numbers. This is a wonderful problem to have, that we have money in the bank and we have to know how to manage it.
Is we have high reserves just because of what we did in a short period of time, but they are not they're the reserves. They're not revenue generating, so they're going to be depleted if we continue with an expenditure trend like we're doing. And so so the expenditure trend has to be less than what we're doing right now to continue with that 3%. So we have to then have some difference of the expenditure trend. So, and we can do that.
Okay.
What we wanted to do here is again, Dr. Chestnut asked me to, with certain assumptions, put this together. So if the assumption is, what is 3%, then it's working backwards. Then it's like, what then can you give as a raise? What then can you do? And we can do that. That's a different way of. Right, and we don't have revenues right now to maintain extra expenditures. So we have reserves to spend on one-time expenditures, but we don't have reserves to maintain. It's not bringing in, right. Okay. An override would help. An override that comparable to some districts.
Item,
right.
Aaron. Don't jump the gun. We got to save the suspense.
Right, right.
All right, any other questions for Mr. Roush or any other questions for Dr. Chestnut?
Yeah, just in light of this discussion, which I think is really valuable, thank you for putting all this information together. I think that we are considering our reserves and we're considering our expenditures, but we're not also considering non-classroom expenditures that could be cut. And I think that at some point in time, whether it's this budget or for next year's budget, we need to look at that because that is also something that can be considered. We are not bound to our current expenditures. And so I would just like to reiterate that we need to look at any non-classroom spending that, that could be cut back in order to increase in-classroom spending. And then I don't know if this is the end of our budget, the budget discussion. I do want to know, since we tabled the other item, but it's on here, on the DAA, the proposed expenditure increases, the district-wide technology and the academic focus and the regular route bus. I would just like some more information about what those are and why they're necessary and what they're going to be.
Absolutely, we can provide that.
Mr. Roush, Dr. Chestnut, is it fair to say that you guys have been operating under the mindset of making sure that we are at average as far as the standard goes with the state, with what our reserves are, and being able to maintain that over the next, was it 3 or 4 fiscal years, right? And the result of that is the numbers that you've provided, correct? Mm-hmm. So the board, if we wanted to say, okay, we want to be above average or below average, we can have that conversation. But the numbers we have today are being average.
Well, no, fiscal year 17 would be way below average. We would be depleted.
And the reason we did that exercise is just to show what would happen if we continued at current expenditure levels with things we'd like to do, like give raises and that kind of thing. Added 5 teachers, that kind of thing. It did, include the one-time money for $300,000 for academic focus that is proposed, and it did include the $200,000 for technology that is proposed, really one-time expenditures. So that's an area of an example where the board has some flexibility and is going to have to make some decisions on. So we'd be happy to bring more information about that next time. I think that's a good idea.
This academic focus money that is being proposed, in addition to the academic focus money that we already appropriated or
spent
approved?
this year, yes.
Spent this year,
and it would be money to fund those items next year. And I think what I'm guessing the principals would do would be to conserve that money and really kind of not necessarily spend it all, but put it in the bank and make that academic focus last for a couple of years.
Well, Dr. Chestnut, with that, couldn't their academic focus be, we want to hire a teacher?
Well, no, we have restricted it to curriculum, materials, and program.
But it could be.
Well, theoretically, that's kind of what we're talking about, is how many additional teachers can we afford to add? I mean, that's kind of been the gist of the whole discussion all spring, and we've tried to add as many as we can in a responsible fiscal manner, and that's the reason why we asked for 2 additional high school teachers and 4 special ed teachers. We also were required to hire 2 more CTE teachers to stay in compliance with state requirements. So there's been a number of proposals around that issue, and then it's a matter of putting the final pieces together. How much can we afford for next year? And that's what we're going to have to make a final decision on.
We have the information on any potential cost savings from our special ed review by June 11th?
They gave us a date of when that's going to be done. I don't think it will be by June 11th. Ms. Roden, do you remember the date? We are hoping to get, that's the final report will be done by then. We are hoping to get an advance preview of staffing. We don't have it yet.
Because that will affect as well.
And I do want to say that part of the highlights is we're not funded for our ELL program as we were in the past. And so instead of cutting those teachers, essentially 5 or 6 teachers, we did not cut. And so that if we were in a dire straits, we would have cut those. But we're recommending not to cut the expenditures the grant expenditures that we lost. So that in itself is 5 or 6 elementary teachers that we're funding out of M&O extra this year. Mm-hmm.
A lot of these expenses, these additional expenses, are things that we've already committed to, right? And so
throughout the year. Mm-hmm.
But we've already committed to for next fiscal year.
For fiscal year 15. The highlights that we've talked about.
Yes, so what would be very helpful to me is if we took these in buckets and said, okay, this is the dollar amount with which we have to work that is not already committed, based on the reserves that you're proposing, and based apparently on not cutting anything else from our existing budget. Then the board needs to have that discussion so that we can arm wrestle about what our priorities are and where to invest those dollars. If we want to tweak the amount and adjust the reserves, or if we want to go back to you and say, hey, we need an extra X to fund Y, then we need to go back and find that. But I think part of the confusion, at least for me, is there is certainly it's what staff is proposing, but it's not really clear about what flexibility that we have in this process.
In all fairness, the sheet that's on the board has everything in there that we've discussed, including 5 additional teachers, including the $300,000 in academic focus, and including the technology, even though a final decision hasn't been made there. So we're trying to project out what it would look like, and I agree that it can be refined more.
My point is I'm looking at the preliminary fiscal year 15 budget highlights, or just addressing those 3 items that you mentioned. There's 5 teachers, there's technology, and what was the other item? Academic focus.
Kristen, you want to bring that back up,
So there's $1 million, right? So what would be easier for me, and I'm simple-minded, so keep that in mind, is, okay, Scott, board, here, we got $1 million. Here's where we think we ought to spend it. What are your priorities? And then we can have that discussion. So,
Yeah, I agree.
That's what I was asking for, too.
I agree. I mean, I think that's where we're headed. Yep, I don't see a problem doing that.
All right, any other questions, or can we move forward onto our override options? Everybody good? Got enough information?
We do.
Okay, moving on. 5E, override options. Dr. Chestnut.
I believe we have PowerPoint slides on this. Could be wrong about that. You don't? Is it on board docs? Okay, that's just as good. It's on board docs. I think Christian can find them on board docs for us. So technically, not PowerPoint slides, but there we go. Okay, so if you recall at our last board meeting, we talked about recommendations from the Override Committee and ideas that they had, and the request was to bring this back into 3 or 4 options to look at. And so that's kind of what I did. I call them draft because that's what they are, based on the discussion that we've had over the last couple months. So option number 1 would be a 5% proposal for 7 years. And you'll notice that all 4 options are 7 years. That was kind of the gist of the committee's recommendation, is that they feel like the time really isn't the issue. And, you know, the way a 7-year override works in Arizona is you would run a new proposal after 5 years because it starts to reduce in years 6 and 7. So it's really a 5-year proposal is what it is. But the first proposal will be for 5%. And you'll notice that the biggest chunk of money would be for class size reduction. Approximately 19 additional teachers. And we are still kind of fleshing this out, what this would look like. That's why it says draft. But the recommendation from the Override Committee was that we need to look at things like our gifted program and our arts program and our technology program. We need to look at secondary honors programs because those are the things that we need to improve. And that's what we're competing against from Kyrene and Tempe Union. And so that's the biggest chunk right there would be additional teachers. So number 2 would be instructional technology, $350,000, a total of $1.35 million. That'd be virtually identical to the proposal we ran 2 years ago, at least as far as dollar amount. Okay, option 2 would be 7 years. And it would be, 7% for 7 years. And you can see, because we have a little more percentage, we can add a few more additional teachers. So I kind of added 1A, because really 1 is all about class size reduction. It's about additional teachers, and it's really about programs too, right? It's additional teachers to create and expand programs. But this would expand in a different way, or an additional way, in the fine arts and foreign language. There was the theory from the Override Committee that we need to look at foreign language and how can we improve that. And so that is added there, and instructional technology would go up $100,000, total of $1.95 million for a 7% override. Option 3, you're welcome to interrupt as I go here.
I have a question, not a question, but a comment. Going back to the first slide, which would be 5%. I quickly, after talking to you, Dr. Chestnut, calculated that it would be about $57 a year, or up to about $120 a year per assessed value of their home. So that would be per family. So that's the 5%. So you're looking at $57 all the way up to about $120 increase a year.
It'd be $57 a year on a $100,000 home. That's correct.
We have a lot of homes that are $250,000.
Right.
So
it'll be more,
realistically, it would be $57 to about $120.
depending on the value of your home, yes?
Okay.
Mhm.
Correct,
Right.
but still.
Assessed value, which is lower than market value. Mhm.
Correct. I just want to keep that in mind when we're
Right.
talking about this.
So 9%, you can see we just add a few more things. Instead of 2 under 1A, we had 4 elementary teachers and 2 at the high school. I believe the previous proposal was 2 and, well, you'd have to go back and look, but it's more, more teachers. And additional funds for instructional technology. And then the final proposal, 15% is option number 4 for 7 years. And you can hire an awful lot of teachers. When you have a 15% override, you could hire around 50, 51. And that would be a lot of teachers. So those are really the 4 main options. And last meeting, governing board, at least one member mentioned we should see if we get a consultant to look at this proposal, and we've asked for a consultant for some information. And we hope to have that some preliminary information to you by the next governing board meeting.
So you'll have something more on that on June 11th?
We hope so, yes.
Because my question is, early ballots do go out July 31st. So we need to move, I mean, you're right, but we still need to move on this pretty quickly if we're going to.
Mr. Kamarchek and I debate this endlessly, and 2 years ago, the board approved this, I believe, on July 30th, and it was quick. We still had a good campaign, and it would always be better to have a lot more time, but we think we can still get a pretty good campaign in the amount of time that's available.
We have more support now we have more support now with the partnership with MEF than we did last year when we decided to do this, or
Right.
2 years ago when we decided to do this.
And just
There's
to really,
more support.
And to be clear, I like to make this point every meeting, because I can shift into the Vote Yes Committee, which is something that I have to do on my own time after work hours, as do all school employees. We can't use any of our time or school district resources to work on the Vote Yes Committee, and we're very faithful to doing it that way. What the school district can do is provide information, and we will do that, if the board puts this on the ballot.
Clarification, Dr. Chestnut, the proposal of what the district submits to voters is certainly an important piece of the puzzle, but the primary emphasis of getting some professional support is to identify whether or not it could actually win an election and get more yes votes and no votes, and if so, how that happens. So I trust that that's a big part of that process that you're. Okay.
Correct.
Okay, any other questions for Dr. Chestnut? No? Okay. Lots to think about. Thank you. All right, that brings us back down to our item 7, F, G, and H, which is moving into executive session to discuss several different
I'll take some liberty here.
Go ahead.
The intent was to move C and D before the executive session. We have a lot of folks here who want to be privy to that conversation and some logistics as well with the television audience. So
We just did D and E.
no, we were just working off the.
We just completed the work study sessions, which was 5D and E.
Right, now we need to do 7D and E.
No, we tabled those.
Correct, we tabled them to the end of.
I thought we
This
tabled them to the
meeting.
next meeting. I didn't table it till the end of the meeting, till the next meeting.
Well, I made a motion, and the intent of my motion, and Lisa, if you could help me here, was that we would table to the end of this meeting before the executive session. I think I mistakenly said before item H, but F and G and H are all executive session. So for the courtesy of the folks we have here, I would like to have, to discuss items 7D and 7E before we go into executive session.
Okay, then I misunderstood, because I thought we tabled it to the next meeting. You just said table it. You didn't specify.
No, she said,
Oh, okay.
I didn't hear that either.
Yeah, when you
My
explained it, you were saying
apologies.
so that Dr. Chestnut and Mr. Roush could give their budget discussion. That's what I heard you say.
Yes, so that we could.
So it was before item H. Okay, that's
And
fine.
the board can make a decision to table it again in perpetuity if we want, but I think we owe Member Noor and the staff the opportunity to have a
I
conversation.
didn't hear it before H, but that's fine. All right, so we are at 7E. Sorry,
D.
7D. It's been a long night. All right, 7D, discussion and possible approval of the 5 additional elementary teachers for the purpose of class size reduction. Dr. Chestnut, do we have any further discussion on that or any motions? Do you have anything to say, Dr. Chestnut?
I don't, other than reflecting on our budget projections, we need to refine that further because I'm not comfortable with with adding them and where we'd be at the end of fiscal year 17. I mean, that's the problem. There is some money that we do have choices over. It's not a lot. And at this time, I can't recommend 5 teachers. I think we can bring back additional information at the following meeting, at the next meeting, that could maybe give some other options, a reduced number possibly, and let the board make some decisions about that. Kind of going back to that bucket idea that Scott mentioned. What is the money we have really that's discretionary at this point in time?
Okay.
Tabling this again, given Dr. Chestnut's proposal to come back to us at the next meeting with some options so that we are not boxed in on what we are voting for, but that we have some options of where the money can go and what we can do with that.
Okay, so is that a motion or?
Before a motion is made, I would like to mention that if we table this item to the next meeting, then this item, as it's written, will be on that next agenda. If we do not act on this agenda item, it dies, and that gives staff the flexibility of bringing it back in whatever capacity. We can talk about it in the whole scope of the budget, teachers, more raises, more whatever, versus having it be as it's written in 7D. Food for thought.
If I read this correctly, it's just discussion and possible approval. We don't have to make a motion on this at all.
Correct.
We can just let it go.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, so are we okay moving on? Okay. 7D, discussion and possible approval of additional funding for district-wide technology and additional funding to support the academic focus of all 9 schools. So you're okay moving on?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Dr. Chestnut, you okay with that? All right. So now we are bringing back to 7F, G, and H. I need a motion to move into executive session to cover those items.
Motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. We'll now go into executive session. Thank you very much for sticking with us, and remember to email us, because I know your brains are buzzing, so we need to hear from you. So thank you. I have 8:32.